Alright, this is a video response to Calvinism and Arminianism, part 1, just some brief comments. So I'm going to have to disagree with the gentleman who posted the video and saying that Calvinism and Arminianism are only a fog paper pot. And I'm going to have to say that, as a Calvinist coming out of Arminianism, that there is a huge world of difference between Calvinism and Arminianism in the gospel that each one of them preaches, because they're not the same. That's for sure. One of them teaches that through God giving grace, a prevenient grace, a grace that goes before, we are restored our will so that we can exercise them freely, and in exercising our free wills we can make a choice to accept the gospel, and in accepting the gospel we become saved, we become justified, but we can lose that justification. The other gospel, on the other hand, the gospel of grace, or as Charles Spurgeon would have said, it is the gospel. Calvinism is the gospel. Spurgeon said it himself. This is a gospel where salvation is completely of grace. It begins by God electing and choosing some of all of fallen humanity according to His graciousness, His kindness, His mercy, and His love, and just leaving the others in their own sin. He didn't force them to become sinners. They stay what they are, and they stay what they want to be, rebellious sinners. And the ones whom God chooses to save, He saves completely by grace. They contribute nothing. He gives them the Spirit in their regeneration. He gives them the faith, which brings about their justification, and He even gives them, in giving them the Spirit, the gift of perseverance. It was commented that Calvin taught that the right kind of once saved, always saved, if you persevere, which is essentially evangelical Arminianism, and obviously not what Calvin taught. The gentleman said that he read all of the Institutes. How he didn't discern what Calvin taught is, well, I really don't know. Obviously, Calvin wrote more than the Institutes, and here they are. He wrote more than this. There's an entire set of commentaries right back over there that he wrote. So obviously trying to find out everything that Calvin believed and how he interpreted certain texts, you can't just get it from the Institutes. You have to go to commentaries. He has other letters. He has other works. For instance, to show on his doctrine of perseverance that he doesn't just believe that it's something if we persevere according to our free will. I want to read from his commentary on the epistle to the Philippians. Philippians chapter 2, 12 and 13. He notes here, "Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure." And in commenting on verse 13, he says here, "It is God that worketh. This is the true engine for bringing down all haughtiness. This the sword for putting an end to all pride, when we are taught that we are utterly nothing and can do nothing except through the grace of God alone. I mean supernatural grace, which comes forth from the Spirit of regeneration. For considered as men, we already are alive and move in God." Acts 17:28. But Paul reasons here as to a kind of movement different from the universal one. Let us now observe how much he ascribes to God and how much he leaves to us. There are in any action two principal departments, the inclination and the power to carry it into effect. Both of these he ascribes wholly to God. What more remains to us as a ground of glorying? Nor is there any reason to doubt that this division has the same force as if Paul had expressed the whole in a single word. For the inclination is the groundwork. The accomplishment of it is the summit of the building brought to a completion. He has also expressed much more than if he had said that God is the author of the beginning and of the end. For in that case sophists would have alleged by way of cavil that something between the two was left to men. But as it is, what will they find that is in any degree peculiar to us? They toil hard in their schools to reconcile with the grace of God free will of such a nature, I mean, as they conceive of, which might be capable of turning itself by its own movement, and might have a peculiar and separate power by which it might cooperate with the grace of God. I do not dispute as to the name, but as to the thing itself. In order, therefore, that free will may harmonize with grace, they divide in such a manner that God restores in us a free choice, that we may have it in our power to will aright. Thus they acknowledge to have received from God the power of willing aright, but assign to man a good inclination. Paul, however, declares that this to be a work of God, without any reservation. For he does not say that our hearts are simply turned or stirred up, or that the infirmity of a good will is helped, but that a good inclination is wholly the work of God. Now, in the calumny brought forward by them against us, that we make men to be like stones, which we teach that they have nothing good except from pure grace, they act a shameless part. For we acknowledge that we have from nature an inclination, but as it is depraved through the corruption of sin, total depravity, as it is depraved through the corruption of sin, it begins to be good only when it has been renewed by God. Nor do we say that a man does anything good without willing it, but that it is only when his inclination is regulated by the Spirit of God. Hence, in so far as concerns this department, we see that the entire praise is ascribed to God, and that what sophists teach us is frivolous, that grace is offered to us and placed, as it were, in the midst of us, that we may embrace it if we choose. For if God did not work in us efficaciously, he could not be said to produce in us a good inclination. As to the second department, we must entertain the same view. God says he is Greek, ho energon to energin, he that worketh in us to do. He brings therefore to perfection those pious dispositions which he has implanted in us, that they may not be unproductive, as he promises by Ezekiel, I will cause them to walk in my commandments, Ezekiel 11:20. From this we infer that perseverance also is his free gift. There's always the accusation that Calvin's followers taught more than Calvin himself. There's been plenty of scholarly work, especially in the grounds of limited atonement, to show that Calvin indeed held to a form of it, although obviously not developed as much. For whatever reason, he didn't need to. A lot of the focus then, again, was sola scriptura and sola fide. In regards to Michael Servetus, geez, what can you say? Calvin pleaded with the guy. He's a product of his time, of his culture. A lot of people burned people at the stake back then. Church of England did it. That's what they did with heretics at the time. He was a man of his times. You can't ask him to act outside of a time that he didn't know. I think that's pretty unfair, pretty ad hominem against Calvinism. And I'd like to make some further responses to this. I'm going to try to keep it within the time limit, because YouTube has time limits. But I hope this is informative.